Should political parties be restricted from sponsoring visual news channels? Your thoughts on this? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think particularly in South India, it's very blatant, where every political party has its own news channel itself. I think everybody has the right to express themselves. Political parties have the right to express themselves. Where I have a problem is to call it news. So please call it infotainment. Please call it as the public outreach of a political party, but to cloak political propaganda as news is what is dangerous for democracy, because not everybody can make that distinction. Not everybody knows that this is actually not news, but it's actually the propaganda or the agenda of a political party, which every party has every right to express, but then be very clear about it and label it. So that's what we say, label it. So for example, if it's an article by the spokesperson of a particular party, please say that right in the beginning, that these are the views not of the channel but of the spokesperson of a particular party, so that people then have access, they can process that information through that lens. And again, which is why it's so newspapers are very easy to achieve, but in the visual media, you're right. I think we need to make some sort of a progress where, when it's not news, I wish we can go back to the days where Doordarshan News, you actually tuned into it for, half an hour in the evening and you got the information that you wanted. Now, unfortunately, and listen, there's a very good comparison. You will be surprised. Can you tell me in the chat box, which is the number one sport watched on TV in India? Number one sport watched on TV in India.
Number one sport was the cricket.
Cricket, okay. Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of cricket. Please, I want some more answers. I see number one sport, cricket. You're saying. Please go ahead.
Maybe
Number one
football.
sport, cricket,
Tennis.
football, anything else? Tennis. In India, you're saying people watch tennis more than cricket.
We all watch Wimbledon now.
Okay, I see kabaddi. Kabaddi, yeah, that's okay. Good. So we see cricket, kabaddi. Okay. Did you expect this? Wrestling is the number one sport watched in the country. Followed by kabaddi and then cricket. Okay. So human nature is such, we like fighting. We like this, it's entertainment. And unfortunately, our news channels have become wrestling matches. So if you look at what is happening, that's what is happening, which is fine. But let's label it as an entertainment. Like WWF or WWE, people know it's not a real sport. Unfortunately, people actually think that what our television anchors are doing is news. I mean, it's not news. It's not. It's an infotainment show.
Yeah, there's some other questions on the chat box, Timothy, if you can.
Yeah, I'm just going through that.
Someone asked.
Okay, this is a good question. If you say that the consumption of information is really different for every individual, then is it not true to say that everyone will possess their own truth, which they will project? Absolutely right. Arsalan. That's the whole point, and which is why it's very flawed. In fact, India is very vibrant when you have a coalition government of 30, 40 parties, because the chances are that your government actually represents the diversity of your country. So if you look at America, for example, very, very flawed. You have only two choices. You either go Republican or you go Democrat, which means you're distilling the entire 150, 200 million people of that country into two stereotypes. You either like A or B. Absolutely right. So in a true democracy, you will have the ability to vote for whoever who represents your best aspirations. And so if you look at some of the really progressive democracies in Europe, they have, although they're small countries, they have multi-party coalitions because they represent different interests. So some people care about the environment, then they'll vote for a party that is pro-environment. Somebody cares about having lower taxes, then you vote for that. So absolutely right. Unfortunately, in India, we don't even have policy discussions. A lot of our politics is identity politics. It's not about discussion, which is why irrespective of which party comes to power, they just rename the policy and it becomes the same. So there is actually no difference between the policies between parties. We actually don't have a left or a right when it comes to public policy in our country. Any
Yeah.
other question?
Timothy, one from our Vice President, Sri Hem Kumar. His question is, what's your opinion about election pre-poll survey, etc.?
Okay. Pre-poll surveys are, in fact, in America, they've really got it down to a science. So if you notice you'll see this coming election, they've done it to such scientific accuracy and perfection that they're able to declare an election as soon as voting ends, because they're so sure with their pre-poll, their opinion polls, etc. In India, there's a problem because of a huge population. It's a huge problem, because how are you going to get a representative sample to do your pre-poll analysis? I think it's very, very difficult, and I would dare say that scientifically, if you look at it in terms of scientific research and sampling, it's a fluke whenever people get it right. It's a gut feeling and a fluke. It's impossible. And secondly, India actually takes secret ballot very seriously. A lot of people don't tell you the truth who they're actually going to vote for. So, it's very difficult to actually get a true sampling, which is why if you look at the last two general elections, very different, the final results, and, people thought it'll be close, but the people of India had overwhelmingly voted for the BJP in the national, for example. Nobody expected that, way beyond expectations. So, but what is the value in that? I think there's value in that for political operatives in political parties. But honestly, it's not of much value, and it actually dilutes the concept of democracy, because it goes against the whole principle of secret ballot. Because if you are able to then say that this is who I'm going to vote for, then this whole point of going and having a secret ballot is sort of diluted. And in fact, if I can ask each one of you to look through your Facebook contacts and tell me how many if you know how each person is going to vote, I think you'll all have a fair idea who is going to vote for which party. Which again is, one of those, right in the beginning, I told you there were 4 prongs to democracy, and secret ballot, I think that's one of the other critical components of democracy which have been diluted by social media, because we all pretty much know, based on the kind of information we are putting out, based on the kind of articles we're liking, based on the kind of articles we're sharing, everybody has a very clear idea what your political ideology is. And for media persons, this is really bad, and which is why my advice to media persons is, please don't be on social media and put out tweets, because the public trust in you is going down, because people are looking to you as being independent, okay, not as being in one side or the other. So the moment you're openly tweeting a particular point of view, what you don't realize is the public is not trusting you. Maybe people who believe the same way are using you as a cheering squad, but there's no public trust and credibility in you. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, we have 3 more questions. Don't mind, Timothy?
Please, I have all the time.
Question is, why are the news anchors not encouraging honest debates on prime times without listening to the guest speakers? They actually take sides and give their own opinions instead. Don't you think the television news culture has to change?
Absolutely. I think we've discussed this. Like I said, there's a reason why everybody watches WWE, right? Or wrestling. I think fundamentally, philosophically, if we can agree that the role of the news media is to enlighten the public, okay, that is supposed to be the role of the news media, to enlighten the public. But what is happening today is that news organizations are actually echoing the sentiment of the public, which is very dangerous. Because for public opinion, actually the news media, through credible and information which has integrity, is supposed to enlighten the public, so that the public is a more mature public and we can become a more mature democracy. But when the media houses become a place where they are reflecting public opinion, it's very dangerous. Please, let's be very clear. Public opinion is almost always wrong. Okay? It's almost always wrong. During the heights of Nazi Germany, the public opinion 70% was in support of Hitler. So let's not go by public opinion is right. In fact, so it's a shame on the media that the media is reflecting public opinion when your job should be to educate the public to have access to adequate, relevant information. Are you talking about policies that affect you? How many of our news debates are focused on policy considerations that are affecting us as citizens, for which we're paying tax? Right, and I think so. That's unfortunately, Ram Rakshit. The answer is it goes back to the conversation I had about commercial considerations. People want TRPs. The more eyeballs you have, the more advertising revenue you get. This is a business. Now, media and news is not supposed to be a business. The judiciary is not supposed to be a business, which is why traditionally, if you look at the BBC, if you look at Doordarshan, these are all publicly funded news organizations. Very different from government control. Publicly funded independent news organizations. I think that is the correct approach. Privatization of news is actually a big disservice to democracy. Just as imagine if we start privatizing the judiciary. Imagine if we start having sponsors for judges to pay their salaries.
Yeah. Another question, probably you've answered this, but let me take this. Sir, isn't global democracy now changing to populism as people vote for parties which they feel matches their opinion? Isn't that against democracy as a whole?
Exactly, and which is why I kept insisting during the talk that you have to go back to one person, one vote. Each of you should make up your own mind, which is why social media is so dangerous. Because when you look, you see 10 of your friends are liking one particular, you're not using your brain. You're looking at a collective group think, which is a psychology concept. You are thinking, you're taking the collective and stereotyping your own decision. You're not taking decisions for yourself. And so this whole point of having populism, and it all comes from media driven. But let's also be very clear about this. Political parties will do everything they can to get elected, right? So you can't blame the political. That is their job. Is they will say anything they can to get elected. But where is our intelligence? And unfortunately, our intelligence is being compromised because you don't have a media which is giving you news. You have access to an abundance of information which is actually fueling your own prejudices, fueling your own fears, fueling your own biases. And so you end up, actually you will read stories that will make you feel happy today. Like for example, I like a particular sport. Now I follow a particular team. I will read news that makes me feel good about my team. I'm not going to read a news which says that they call the person who I support on sports a useless fellow. It's like, no, that's rubbish. We've all become fans. And it works perfectly for political parties. See, if you look at it, all the political parties, have you seen them socially? They are such great friends with each other. But on the ground, people will be killing each other down on the ground, the grassroots. Okay? So for political parties, it's a game, right? But unfortunately, the media has a role to play, and all of us as citizens, do we take our civic rights seriously? Do we take the right that we have, that our vote counts for something? I'm going to use my mind. I'm going to use my intellect. I'm going to actually research, take the information available on that basis, make electoral decisions. Also, I'm curious to ask Professor Sudesh, how many of our ULC graduates are in active politics? We need, if you look at the leading democracies in the world, lawyers, tend to, leading lawyers tend to have a big role to play in the political discourse of the country, and we don't. And so then we end up having people who are seldom educated and generally ruffians and strongmen who end up entering politics.
Thank you, Timothy. There's one question from your friend Malaya. He asks, what about paid news? Is it true?
Yeah, absolutely. Paid news is true. If you look at, I think in newspapers, suddenly you'll see one full page about a lovely article written about a company. You can be 100% sure that it's been bought. Now, people realize that there is still credibility in news. So why not take a full page advertisement? When I take an advertisement, people know, yes, obviously, if I take an advertisement for myself, I'm only going to talk good things about myself. But if there's a news article about me, that's very attractive. People will actually think, oh, wow, this is, the Times of India has come up with a full page article on this thing. So this must be but it's actually paid. It's an advertisement. But you have reporters who write news, um, but it's an ad. That's the sad state of affairs. And in fact, in our journalism school, we do a course on journalistic ethics, and we talk about how this has to be, again, if there's any scope for regulation where we can actually work together. In fact, I would like to have a conversation with Professor Sudesh at some point to see how we can work together to come up with a framework for regulating the media without it being a curb on freedom of expression. I think the country needs jurisprudence on this. Sir, I learned jurisprudence from you.
Thank you.
But I do think that is the need of the hour to actually have legal reform in this area.
Yeah. Timothy, one more question. Sir, in comparison to visual and social media, has print media still maintained the reliability, having taken the fact that many freedom struggles were being inspired from print, such as Kesari, Young India, etc., which might also sound more as an opinion than of a news? So, how do you build up the answer between the dichotomy of opinion and news?
See, by and large, if you look at the mainstream newspapers, okay, whether it's Indian Express, Deccan Herald, Hindu, Times of India, Telegraph, if you look at the Hindustan Times, the mainstream newspapers, ultimately, journalists are actually, people don't get into journalism because they want to become businessmen. People actually get into journalism because as lawyers, they care about certain values. They care about democracy. They care about truth. And you have fundamentally, with all of this, let's not bash the fact that, we have a tremendously powerful and committed group of journalists, particularly in the newspaper space. I think print, it's still, I can read any newspaper and come up thinking I've got credible information. And I think if you, examine yourselves and whatever newspaper you pick today, Deccan Herald, Hindu, Indian Express, you may have a slight slant one way or the other, but fundamentally there's integrity because there's an editorial process which goes in and you get news. And you get news which affects you locally, state-wise, national-wise in the world. Now, mouthpieces like party publications, I think that's not mainstream, right? I mean, we don't actually call that as a newspaper. I mean, it's like a newsletter. Each political party will have its own, newspaper. But I think it's become so expensive now that it's very difficult to print and circulate it. So I would still very much say that mainstream newspapers are the best place to go to get information, credible information. I think digital space is highly suspect. I do think there's a need for editorial processes to spill over. Now, the other challenge we face is all the credible sources of information are going behind a paywall because they have to pay their journalists, right? So if you look at globally, New York Times, like the Times of London, they've all gone behind a paywall. The Hindu's gone behind a paywall. What that means is if you want to have credible information, you have to pay for it. Now, that's not sustainable either. Because then what you'll have in the public domain that's free is all the opinion pieces and all the free news and all the fake news. And so I really think there is a need for independent media to be supported, which is why there's an organization called IPSMF, which is doing a great job, funded by some of the biggest philanthropists in our country, where they fund independent news media organizations. And we really need that independence of media so that the public as a whole can be enlightened. And but I also think if you look at it, with all of this information obesity that we have, too much of information, I do think by now people are getting a hang of it. They know what is propaganda. They know what is. So sometimes you're just reading it like you're supporting your sports team, but you know what's actually going on.
Yeah, finally, Timothy, how to regulate social media? Any law for that?
I would like to work with you, sir, on that to see how we can, I think there is a need. I think we can achieve it without curbing constitutional freedoms of expression. I think we need to figure out a way to do it by labeling. I think there is a way to label it. Can we say that only, content that comes from certain organizations that meet certain thresholds of editorial processes will be labeled as news? The rest can be there. You can have that information there, but don't call it news. So when you say, for example, like you have that tick that you have for a verified account or whatever, I think that we can work towards a regulation where it says when it comes from an accredited news organization, then there's some sort of a tick which gives a reader the confidence that this comes from an organization that takes the ethics of journalism seriously.
I said finally, but I think one question is repeatedly being prompted. Isn't there a bias in displaying outrage in various violent incidents? Do you think this prejudice is being called out, sir? Yeah.
I agree. I agree, and I think there's a whole stream of literature and research out there on freedom of expression, the free press, and it having a counter sort of effect where governments are forced to do things because they feel that the whole country is actually being instigated towards violence, etc. So if you look at what's happening with Black Lives Matters in the United States, I think for as much as you may agree with the principles behind it, violent expression is never right. However you look at it, violent expression of protest is never right. You can never justify it, because if you can justify violent protest to your rights, then you also have to justify acts of terrorism. You also have to justify suicide bombings. Then there is it's a slippery slope, right? And to again have media spur on these sort of scenes of unrest, etc., which may not again be, for example, you take a small lane and show a big protest and people think that the whole of the country is in protest, which may not be true, but it gives the impression that is true. But again, it's all in context. It's in context if there is a movement of the people. For example, if you look at the anti-CAA protests, which perhaps went on too long, but all over the country there were protests. Now you can't say I'm not going to cover it because it's not happening. So, but again, if there's just one place it's happening and then you're covering it, then again that's not representative because you're sensationalizing one small incident. So let's look at lynchings, for example. Lynchings are not new. It's not happened only in the last 5 to 6 years. Okay, it has been happening for the last 40 to 50 years in the country. But suddenly it becomes an issue as if it is happening in the last 5 years. That is not fair. Right? Because then you need to give it in context. You need to give it in context. Are you doing an analysis of how many are happening over the last? So if you actually look at the research, you will find that lynchings have come down in the last 10 years as the country evolves. So presenting information in context, and a good example of this is our students, they produce a daily snapshot of COVID statistics. Do you know that every day 65,000 people are discharged from COVID? We talk of the number of people who die. Do we say that 65,000 people were discharged from COVID just yesterday per day? That context is missing, right? For example, a plane crashes and 3 people die, 200 people survive. The headline is always 3 people die. You don't say 200 people survived and 3 people died. Right? So I think it's very important for journalists, that's that principle of harm that we talked about, that you have to balance the need for information of the public with the harm that is going to create. Now, if I publish this sensational news, are there going to be riots? Okay, that is also a consideration that journalists, you cannot be irresponsibly saying I have the truth, I'm going to put it out. What harm are you going to cause the society by is that going to be provocative? For example, the Charlie Hebdo controversy in France, that organization, they published a very, very disrespectful cartoon which showed a particular religion in a poor light. Is that a responsible thing to do? It is not. Because that is you're provoking a response, and unfortunately media houses do that as well.